Welcome to Weekend Walkabout. This is Janet McConovich. I'm here with Stephen Nicola from gardenatoz.org. This is the fifth portion of a series called Plant It Well, Even When the Roots Are Wrong. If you'd like to know a little bit more about Stephen and myself and what reason we have to be able to tell you this, you can look at the introductory section, the first portion of this series. This is copyrighted material. We've put decades of our life and experience and photographs and love into this. We want to share it with you. We want to have this message out. But we would like, if you use it for a larger group, before you use it, please contact us at gardenatoz.org. Thank you. You may have downloaded, or you can download this handout, this material, which is the outline that we'll follow today. It keeps us on track to have this, and we'll show you as we go along where we are on it. You can download this page from our website, gardenatoz.org. Go there to the webinar audience page and download it. Because now we move into chapter 4, the planting, which is maybe the most important thing. We're getting into planting season right now. We've just passed Earth Day. We need to plant when the roots are wrong because the roots are going to be wrong. We're going to plant to beat the fate we showed you. So here's our list. We're going to go through this whole list about removing all the soil above the flare, cutting off the pot mound bottom and removing the wrapping and quartz. This is the least you can do for a plant. That's what we're going to start with. The least you can do is when you go to take it out of the pot, so I'm sliding the pot off of this Sergeant Crabapple, is I'm going to locate the flare level. And I'm not going to be fooled by the swelling where it was grafted. They're almost all grafted. So I'm going to locate that flare, number 3 there. I'm going to locate where the trunk actually widens out into the roots. Even a young tree like that has that. So I'm putting my hands in next to the trunk into the soil and pulling outward. All of those roots are roots that have grown up and wrapped over the actual ball. I'm just sticking my hands in and ripping the roots off. Dr. James Rubin, he says, just cut them off, just cut them off. They're just the root ends, get rid of those. And I'm going all the way down. You can see that it's about 4 inches down. And now as I get down to that level, we're looking at the bulge of the graft by my hand that's underneath the trunk.
Right here.
That's the graft there. Don't let anybody think that's the flare root. And sometimes that graft union will grow one root by itself, but there won't be others there. And you need to go down to where you feel the roots going thicker and going outward. And in this case, that's all the way down, 1/3 of the pot down. So that's the least you can do, is to start by finding and getting and pulling all that stuff off. Pull it off, cut it off. The flare is, you know, want to circle the flare for me, Steve? Right here. Here, the trunk is going wider. And you'll feel it with your fingers. This is the problem with showing you with still pictures, is we can't show you feeling with your fingers.
Even in a movie, you still have to have the fingers that feel.
We're working on it. We're getting better ones. You're also going to slice off the entire bottom layer because the roots went down before they came back up the sides when they repotted. And then you're going to slice vertically into the sides. And you are not going to do this gentle little pinprick on the side. You're going to slice down to the side. I slice almost all the way to the trunk. I'll show you that. So see my carpet knife embedded in that trunk, in that root ball? I've sliced the bottom off, and I am now slicing all the way down the side. I'm slicing open the pot here because I find it much easier to take plants out that way. I use a Milwaukee double-edged knife.
Rambo knife.
Steve calls it my Rambo knife. And the graft is up above my fingers and was buried. I'm down at the flare. Can you see that the trunk down by my fingers is flared outward? That's what you're looking for. So the owner is rinsing, and I am pulling roots away, and now you can probably see the flare sticking out by my fingers. And I'm pushing all those roots out, go out, grow outward. Stop growing up around the trunk. Got it? Find the flare, the least you can do. And it's the least that, this is all that this person would let us do.
Yeah.
Did not want me to
go farther inspection.
Okay, so don't mistake that graft union for the flare. You can also find the flare by putting a probe in. This is one of Gary Watson's articles out of the Morton Arboretum. He's using an actual probe. You can use a skewer, like a barbecue skewer, or I use a long-handled screwdriver.
Screwdriver, anything that.
And if you poke it into the pot, you can see the stain on the trunk where the soil was, where it was grown. If you stick the skewer in next to the trunk, it'll go thunk where it reaches the point where the roots are turning outward, and it'll tell you how deep it is that you have to, how much soil you have to take off the top.
Don't do that anymore. That used to be the practice.
Yeah, they don't know what I'm doing.
Oh.
I am measuring the root ball against my spade, saying, I'm putting my spade next to the root ball saying, okay, we can dig this deep. Don't do that until you've looked to see how deeply the plant is planted in the root ball. So in this case, this one had 6 inches of soil over the trunks of those river birches. I only had to dig as deep as the top of the spade. I only had to dig a hole as deep as 1 spade's depth by the time I took all that soil off.
Remove all the wrappings, cords, wires. All are proven. All have been proven to kill and girdle. And if you can't get the whole basket, get at least the top 2/3, as much as the top if you can.
It's a good reason to dig a wide hole so you can reach in after you put a big plant that was big enough to need a cage to support it while you carried it around. You're going to put it in the hole with the cage, and then you're going to have to use bolt cutters to cut the cage off.
Wide and not deep. Remember, once you loosen this layer, it will settle.
Right, you don't want the tree to settle deeper. That was the problem to begin with. And your burlap, you're going to cut off or push down to the bottom of the hole. Burlap can stop roots growing as well. And it hides a lot of problems.
It hides. You cut the burlap off, you think, just plant that, huh? Look, plastic is forever.
That plastic string was around the trunk from the last time that it was burlapped. And now it's been re-burlapped over the top. If you'd planted that burlap without pulling it back away, you would have left that girdling string right on there. It's already suckered right there.
And this little bit may not look like much, but if it hits a certain, you never know.
When the trunk gets that big, it'll stop it. This is regular rope. This is real rope, not plastic rope. And this is 5 years after this magnolia went in the ground. The rope is still there attached to the cage on the side and is girdling the trunk. So I'm putting this birch in the ground, and I'm putting it in because it's a big tree. I'm not going to take it all apart outside. I dig the hole just as deep as the top of my spade, set the plant in sticking up out of the ground, take the burlap off, cut the cage off, then peel all that soil down into the root, into the hole. See, it's sticking up above the ground. And then watering.
After sorting out the roots, the most important thing you can do is water, and keep it moist.
And for at least 1 year for every inch of trunk diameter. So if you've got a trunk on a shrub or a tree that's 1 inch in diameter, for a full year, you need to make sure that it's watered well. And we make sure with a watering reservoir or a watering ring.
To aim the water right in the root system, root area that you want.
To make sure that you can walk by with a hose and just fill the crater and know that the plant got water. So I've taken extra soil and made a little levee around that stewardia. Now we can just fill that levee. Here's a levee around this new oak. We don't make a crater around it. We brought extra soil up and made a little levee. Now we can fill that. And remember that even though these trees lose 90% of their roots, they were root pruned to keep the roots growing close to the trunk as it is, but the ball and burlap is going to be cutting them even more. Even though you cut that much, they will live if you give them water, and they'll grow more root quickly.
And this one, you had no choice but to cut the root because of where we were at.
This is a 14-year-old weeping hemlock. It's all tied up, not weeping right now, so I can get under it. And I'm digging it out. I'm digging it by hand because we've got gas lines and electric lines and dog fence and irrigation system. And I'm cutting roots. Can you see the size of the root that spans my bridge there? I'm just sawing through the roots, making clean cuts. So just like a ball and burlap, I'm cutting this plant's roots that probably went 8 feet off to the side. I'm cutting them. We loaded it on a ball cart, and Julie and Mary and I took it over to the far side of the yard, planted it, untied
With a
it.
watering ring.
We got a watering crater around it and said, stay there. And we watered it well. And it was pale. For 3 years, it was pale as the gold flame spireas next to it. And then in year 4, it went and started growing again, and it turned green.
And it was about a 4-inch caliper.
Yeah, it was a 4-inch caliper trunk. And
Mulch.
mulch.
But never over the flare.
Always the root zone, not the trunk.
No,
you
no.
know this. You are master gardeners. You are gardeners in the long term. You know not to do this. This is something that's just a monkey see, monkey do.
How it ever started, I have no idea. There's no tree in the world that does that.
And all you're doing is encouraging, if anything, adventitious roots and rot of the trunk. But you know that. I do know how it started. It started because the landscape company brought 20 yards of mulch last year. And despite the fact that ground covers and shrubs have grown and they don't need 20 yards of mulch again, they're bringing 20 yards again, and they're going to put it up against those trunks.
And the shrubs too.
Staking is a very rare occurrence. You shouldn't stake. If something needs support, prop it, crutch it.
The tree needs to flex and move. It gets stronger that way.
Yeah,
it works the buttresses. It works everything.
Woody cells build up more wood and more fiber if they move. If they don't move, they are less strong than the part that does move, and they break at the point where they're staked. So we don't stake. It's a big beech going in. It's not going to need a stake. 20 years, it didn't need a stake. See that red leaf back there? Steve will tell you about this.
That's a Japanese maple that we took out. This was a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of plants that we kept only one in there. We took out the one was a dogwood. It had the best chance to survive in the right spot. We took out this Japanese maple with a small amount of roots.
Maybe a bushel basket of root.
Put it right out here.
No stake.
No staking. It stood up and it survived.
10 years later, it's a beautiful tree. You don't need the stake. If the tree is not loose and falling over, don't worry about it. If it is falling over, this tree, it's a Palo Verde.
It's better to prop.
It was falling over. And I said, well, why is it falling over? They said, because it's so windy. I said, no, Palo Verdes can stand in the wind. This one, I took a branch off. You can see a white where I cut a branch off that was low and we didn't need it. And I used part of that branch to make its own crutch. But what was going on, and they were staking it, it was falling over. When I dug around the base of the tree, can you see the root wrapped around and how deep it was planted? This was just like that willow tree that we showed you earlier. It had just adventitious roots on 2 sides, and it was like on a hinge. It couldn't buttress itself. So I cut that root out. I propped it for a year. The next year, when the wood had turned yellow like this, I could hang on that branch that's sitting there. I could put 130 pounds on that branch and not pull the tree over. So if it needs to be staked because it's falling, check the roots and then prop it. Don't stake it. Don't tie it. Now, here's what we do. We do more than the least we could do, including bare rooting the plant. Here's another dwarf conifer, not the same one we showed you earlier.
No, it's a mugo pine.
See that the trunk was entirely buried and the whole thing was pushed into the ground. We most often now take our plants down to bare root out of the pot. Because we
used to. No, you don't do that.
You can't do that. And now we're doing it all the time. Here's a little Coosa dogwood, costs $30. Little bitty Coosa dogwood. Can you see the roots wrapped around each other? They're in that original little bitty starter pot, still wrapped around. And I've learned that Coosa dogwoods have a tap root. And if they're coiled around that tap root, the plant's never going to grow well. Here is the best we can. This is from a movie that we'll be posting as soon as I can finish editing it. This is a witch hazel. And I want you to look back for a minute at the twisted root by my thumb. See, it's corkscrewed right around, the one that goes across the top. Here's that same root on a witch hazel on the top left, corkscrewing around the other roots and other roots wrapped over the top of it. I had to do what's in the bottom right picture. Can you see the white scar? I had to cut whole roots out in order to get the wraps off. Now that witch hazel, this was last fall, That witch hazel has bloomed. It's budding out right now. We're watching it. We cut probably 50% of the roots off because so many of them were wrapped, corkscrewed, spiraled around each other, and it took bare rooting it to find all of that. And it took an hour and 40 minutes.
And because we value the plant, this was a plant we selected for where it's going to go. We value it, so it can't die, you know.
If you think that our clients can afford to pay us to do that, you're wrong. Most of the time we're planting small now, or I'm doing what we described earlier, which is I'm cutting right into the center with a sharp saw and ripping outwards to say, it's the best that I can do to make sure there's no circles. But if somebody will foot the bill, and I do have clients who indulge me in that because they've seen the success we get, then we take it all the way down to bare root. So this sassafras, we showed you this one earlier. Sassafras is a species that does not like root disturbance. So it says in the books.
They always tell you, don't disturb the roots.
But I took it out, took the soil off the top, said, started looking for where the flare is and where are the roots. Rinsed it off, shook it off, and got it down to where I showed you earlier, taking the roots off from around the trunk. And the tree lived, but it was too far gone in how much embedded damage there was to the trunk. Is this scary? Talk to Steve here. He says, he often says, this one's yours, one's yours, you got to do it. It is scary. Do it anyway. If you have a year's guarantee from the nursery, good. Do it. If it doesn't make it, you take it back to them. I do it, and they honor the warranty. They need to learn. We get 3 responses from garden centers we've talked to, and the types of responses we get are the reason we're talking to you and talking to others, is because we need to change this. The 3 responses we get are, that's no trouble. That's not a problem. Number 1. Number 2, I had no idea when we showed them pictures of what was in there. Third one is, well, we got to find out where these plants are coming from. They haven't gotten to where we are and where others are, that it's coming from everywhere. It's all the plants. We have to deal with it. So some people are doing this. Now, Bonnie Appleton has passed away. She's one of my heroes. She was at Virginia Tech, one of the professors in the extension there. And she said to the nursery people who said, well, you can't do that. That's too much disturbance to the root ball. I'll void my warranty. She said, well, let's see how much disturbance a root ball can take. So they took bare root trees, big trees, 4-inch trees, and some of them, they just put them in per extension standards. They didn't remove any soil. Then they bare rooted some by blowing the soil off. They bare rooted some by pressure washing, and they took others and they lifted them 12 feet in the air in a tree spade and dropped them. And for red maple, 2 years later, no significant differences in any of those trees. It didn't matter whether they disturbed or didn't disturb the roots. Willow oak, done in leaf, didn't like that. So they learned that not to do this with willow oaks. But this stuff has been happening. Extension professors like are listed on your handout have been working on this, but the nursery industry is not listening because the plants do live long enough and people are not cognizant enough of the fact that they should be growing better, that they're getting away with it.
Many people think a tree is a shrub is a temporary. Shrubs could live 50, 60, 70 years. Yeah. Trees, hundreds.
300 years for some shrubs.
1,100. We saw the one in Wales.
So, and if you want them as temporary, okay, but don't you want them to be healthy while they're temporarily there?
Janet was walking by this Metasequoia, nice cultivar, and popped it right out of the ground without asking the client. The client walked by.
The client was at the door waiting to say hello to me, and instead of saying hello, I'm on my knees digging up her dawn redwood. It's a dwarf dawn redwood. She said, I paid a lot for that tree. I said, I know you did, and it's going to die. Look at these roots. They're wrapped all around the trunk. And I could tell that right off the top was dressed. So I cut them and stretched them out because some of them were still flexible. Others, like the one that's wrapped around from the bottom, I cut right off. I couldn't flex it back out. And I know they will grow. You know they will grow. We've shown you pictures, and we're going to show you one more. This is a 7-sun on the right with a light-colored bark. 7-sun tree, one of our favorite fast-growing large shrubs.
That's the one we moved in earlier with the zoo.
Right, we showed you one we moved earlier. We're putting in a new one because the one on the left, which was planted 1 year before, got beat up by a buck, by a deer. And the client said, I don't buy green bananas, put me in a new one. I said, it will grow. See how much has grown already? She said, no, put me in a new one. So I'm doing to the one on the right the same thing I just told you. See the big root sticking out that I've cut? I've chopped it because I couldn't spread it out. The one that's laying across the top has flex to it. And when I plant it, I'm going to spread that one out. But I've taken it down by about 5 inches to get down to this level and taken off roots on the top. And I did the same thing to that tree 1 year before. Look how much root.
Look at all the root it grew.
I know it will grow.
And if you saw the previous pictures, the color of the leaf, these leaves were much better. Look at the
Much
color,
darker leaves.
size, color, everything. A lot less stress.
Well,
But
thank you. I didn't notice to point that out, Steve. Thanks. Okay. So now I planted some larger 7 Sun trees for a client last year. And here's what I did. I sliced the pod off. And I'm not worried about slicing the roots when I slice the pod off.
You're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. I sliced the pod in 2 places. Now I'm taking off extra soil. Here, now the plant is sitting next to the pot. I've taken 1/3 at least of the height of the plant off by taking soil off the top. And then I've cut a wedge right into the trunk.
All the way in.
Now, after I've cut that wedge, I'm looking for the girdling roots. Can you see them? You need to look for these. Can you see this one wrapped right toward you? And can you see that one embedded right there? Up by my knife point. See, it's coming across the trunk. You can see a gap further above my knife. See the black gap where it gaps away from the trunk? That has to come out. And see, there's one under it? Can you see it now? Look for the white right in the dark spot.
I can't find it.
There it is. See it? Those have to come out. And it takes a chisel in many cases if it's an older plant, because these roots have gotten they've gotten thick and hard, and they're not flexible enough to reach them to cut them out.
And that takes time and skill not to cut into the
So now
bark.
in the place that I wedged, so I cut a wedge out, I've rinsed all the soil out, found the roots that are girdling across that wedge and cut them. Some I bend outward, but some I take right off. And there's the level, even after I've taken it down that far, there's where the flare is. It's flared out right here. And you can feel it with your fingers, and all that stuff above it has to get cut off or pulled outward. Cut all the way in. The knife is all the way into the trunk and slice right down. That knife has a saw edge on it, which helps me get through roots. It's not easy to do. After I got done with this one, because the client was nervous about it, I didn't cut off some of those. So those are all adventitious roots. I planted it that way.
Planted it high.
With just the tips of those adventitious roots sitting on the ground. I said, I'll take those off next year, Carol. I'll take them off. Right now, I'm fine. I'm going to leave them, but I am not going to bury them. I am not going to bury the trunk. I'm planting it at the right level. And those trees are doing great. I know they'll do great. We've done the same thing. I beat the living daylights out of the roots of this 7 Sun. It went from that size on the left to the size you see on the right in 2 years' time.
2 years, that's right.
Yep. Shrubs, the same thing. So this is a St. John's wort. You can see the color change in the soil that they've added. 3 inches of soil potting mix added above where it was growing before. Take that all off, find the flare, take off all those roots on the top. And in this case, got a bonus. Quite often happens that shrubs are made from cuttings and they stick 2 cuttings in together. I think you can tell on the right-hand picture that that's 2 cuttings stuck together and wrapped around each other. I said, well, I'm not going to let the trunks girdle each other. So I actually pulled those apart and have 2 shrubs. They're leafing out just wonderfully in my yard. I don't know where I'm going to put them because I bought the plant as a demonstration at a plant garden walk showing people about this stuff. There, now you can see that there's 2.
Where there are 2. 1, 2.
So when I planted them, I said, well, what the heck? And I took the 2 trunks, worked them apart, and pulled them apart. And they're both growing fine. Also took the bottom off. Now, you can rescue what's already planted. And in that case,
don't wait.
Don't
if
wait.
It's growing well, by 1 year, dig, fix, or return. If it's not growing well.
Right. If it's not growing well. And what's well? Well means look it up and see how many inches a year that species should be growing. If it's not growing that well, dig it up. Or return it if you want to do that. It's never too late to buy the plant some time. So here's a for instance. I told you about 112 trees and shrubs we planted on this property. And of those, 93% of them, we had to take the roots all the way apart. one group of plants, Father Gilla's, were beautiful. I said, oh, look at this, nice root systems. Is this great? And so we planted them. They're not in this picture.
I was looking for
in this
them.
picture, we have gold arborvitae, a ground cover geranium, and calycanthus, sweet shrub. But in the next bed over, we have Father Gilla. Show them a Father Gilla.
There.
These are Father Gilla. There were 7 of them.
There.
There are 7 of them. And I looked at them for 2 years,
3,
and they weren't growing well.
6.
So one day I said, I'm digging those up. They're not growing well. And I dug up 6 of the 7 and replanted them. And I ran out of light and didn't replant the 7th. Can you see the 7th one? This is the next year after I released the roots of the 6. There are 3 you can see lined up in a triangle right there. There are another 3 on the other side of the dogwood. And then there's the poor 7th one, which I still have not dug up and released. It's worth doing it. Even this, you're going to take a saw or a chisel and you're going to cut those roots right where they start to bend the wrong way.
Right where they're going straight, cut them.
What if it dies? Well, then you lost a plant that was pooping
Dying
along
anyway.
anyway. Yep, that's a smoke push. That's what I did to that viburnum. That viburnum is growing so much better now. This is a little Kusa dogwood. It's a wolf-eyes Kusa, a variegated Kusa dogwood. And I looked at it and said, it's planted too deep.
The leaves are way too small.
It was June. She said, is it a good time? I said, it's a good time. I'm here now. I've taken that much soil all the way around to get down to the level that you see. It was at least that deep in the ground, almost a shovel's depth. And then I walked it up. I put my shovel underneath it and lifted it. So now it's up to ground level and all that soil is up the back. And you probably can see the cage. See the loops sticking out? The cage was still there. One root had escaped the cage. I cut it and bent it outward and put a stake in so it wouldn't flat back over. I cut the cage and put it back in the ground. So now it's up, sitting up higher, looking silly. We can see the graft crook. But there it is, the year I did it. Oh, sorry, it was May, not June. So it was leafing out. May 2014. Here's a year later. Does it look better to you? People say, oh, dogwoods, the Kusa dogwoods always have their leaves always are kind of hang. No, they shouldn't hang. So they looked like that on the left. They look much better, but there's still a curl to them. I said, I don't think we got it yet. But here's a year later, much better color, but still depressed in the middle. The leader's not growing. So we dug it up again. And I bare rooted it and I unwrapped some roots. And now it's got a center again. It's growing better. It's not great, but it's growing better. So you see what it takes? A lot. This is a new one we just looked at. We've got a film. If we've got a minute, we'll show it. We'll try and show it. Oh, we're over time. It had suckers, went straight into the ground, and the leader was growing weakly and not branching. See it? And all the branches are coming from lower down. So I dug around the base and said, no, but the flare is at least 3 inches down here. Can you replant it higher? And I'll come back and take a look. So they replanted it higher, and we'll show you a film of looking at it. Yep. You can get somebody with an air spade or an air knife to blow soil away and take
dirty job.
Yeah, very dirty job. Now we're out of time for questions technically, but we're going to stay here and keep going because we want to do the entire presentation here. So we're going to go past these questions to go to the next. There's my Sonia the Duck when she was Sonia the Duck. Okay, so these are your references. Look for anything written by these people. John Weaver was in the 1930s looking at roots like this.
And he dug with trenches without support.
Yeah, it's amazing. 15
OSHA
feet
would find him.
Bonnie, Robert, Ed Gilman, James Urban, Gary Watson, they're all still working now, although they're timing out. We're losing those guys too. Books, these are listed for you. And lots of bulletins. This is from James Urban's books showing you the same things we're showing you now. The pot twist inside of the pots, the girdling roots around the trunk. And lots of articles by the International Society of Arboriculture, by various extension universities. This one by ISA is looking at if we cut a buttress root being a flare root or a primary root, how does that affect the tree stability? And they've been cutting red maples that are about 12 inches in diameter and finding it's highly variable how So we're still working on that kind of stuff.
Well, a lot of it depends on the environment where the wind.
But if you look at the fact that this tree on the left was planted with the roots released, and the other tree was planted from the same nursery stock without releasing that root ball, and now we've been dug up to see how much those roots grew after 3 growing seasons, it tells the tale right there. John Weaver was the one who did these studies. They actually dug trenches 15 feet deep to see how deep the roots grew on these things, but he did a lot of prairie plants and agricultural plants too. Look online, search for Weaver and University of Nebraska, and you'll find his work. Whether or not you leave the wire basket on, it increased the planting time, which is something that landscapers care about. And I'm here to tell you, it's made our time 3-4 times as long.
It takes a lot longer to do this.
And according to what their study has shown is that if it's only 2 or 3 years you're looking at, it's not going to make much difference. So of course it's going to live through the warranty period. But the differences were noted in tree stability because when you took off the cage, quite often the trees fell over. But if you read that, well, not quite often, but sometimes, several weeks after planting, a windstorm toppled 2 of the trees and 3 of them that had partially removed cages. We straightened them, we retamped the soil. The trees survived with no noticeable impact to their growth or their health. So, you know, we're still looking at this stuff.
Even though they do recommend staking after the basket.
And we are writing about it. You go on our site, look for the word girdle. Look for the word planting. You'll see pictures of us cutting roots. We've painted the roots here to show you what roots we're cutting. So we've been doing this for a while, and we've been recommending these authors and these books and these techniques. Now we're just here to show you
real life.
That there's no sense waiting for that tree, that holly to sort itself out. You have to cut that circle.
That's what a Coosa dogwood should look like. Look, it's round.
And we want those big healthy trees to be our legacy and your legacy. So go out there and cut. Now we can take questions.
And
so we'll stay. Those of you who are on a time schedule, please go. These questions will be recorded, and we'll see if we can get a transcript out.
Thank you all
very much for coming.
Very much. It's been a pleasure for us.
Yeah, this is a free-for-all now. Any questions that you want. And we are gardenatozee.org. I'm Janet McConovich.
I'm Stephen Nicola.
And we'll keep doing these webinars. You can check on our website for how you can join us. Okay, questions. Let's see what we got. Okay, can I apply these same principles to a container shrub? Oh, we did that one already. Should I root prune every so often? Only if you're keeping it in the container. Let's see what else we got. Now Janet has to scroll.
I can read some questions out if that would be helpful.
If you would do it, that would be great,
sure.
Because I can't really.
Yep. So we've got from Mary, I have a crabapple about 4 feet that gets suckers every year. Should I dig it up and replant?
If you have a crabapple that's suckering, you may not need to replant, but you might need to take the soil away from the trunk, which is going to mean cutting a lot of suckers out of the way because they become a forest. But first, try to bear it like I showed you on our tree. I took 8 inches of soil out and sloped everything away from it, and now it's not suckering anymore. But yes, definitely if you've got suckers on a fruit tree, whether it's a crabapple, an apple, a pear, a cherry, take some soil away from the base, find the flare. I think you'll have a lot less suckers.
Yep. Craig is asking if I'm washing the root balls, warm or cold water, and can you use compressed air to open the root ball?
Compressed air is really the way to go. It is messy. It's called an air spade or an air knife. We've done it, and it's wonderful to just blow the soil away, but it does make a mess. On soil temperature, I don't know of anything that's anybody studied what temperature water. We use it right out of the hose. We just use the water as it comes out of the hose. We haven't had a problem.
Carol is asking for roses in Michigan. We are told to plant the graft 2 to 3 inches below soil level. What do we do in this case?
Roses are another case entirely because they are, because the grafted portion of the rose is not always hardy. It is a good idea to plant them deep in order to get them to grow adventitious roots from the grafted portion rather than relying on the part below the graft, because the graft itself may fail. So Ontario, oh, now I've forgotten the name of the extension location research lab in Ontario. Definitely at the Hamilton at the Royal Botanical Garden, they've been doing this for quite a while. But at the research station in Ontario, they first pioneered the idea of planting roses 4 inches deep right from the get-go, and you're actually encouraging them to form a whole separate root system. So do that with roses.
Jennifer asks, how do you prevent girdling with patio trees in large pots? The diameter of the pot is not big enough to let the roots grow to their normal diameter, so they have to grow around the sides.
Right, the bigger the plant is, the more trouble you're going to have with girdling roots. And there are some pots, Bill Schneider out at Wild Types Nursery is one of those growers who's growing in pots that have the construction of the pot is such that the roots run into air and stop circling. But that can only really work up to a certain size. Once the plant is bigger than that, it needs a bigger root system. So with the bigger plants, unless someone is taking them out and root pruning them, actually sawing and cutting those roots off, you're not going to get a good root system. You're going to have to do the root pruning right when you get it. It's all I can tell you. We don't plant big anymore. If we do plant big, we might be planting a ginkgo this year that's good size. We say, we're planting it big for you, we'll do the best that we can, but we're not guaranteeing that it's going to make it more than 5 or 10 years. It's just, that's the reality of the situation.
Okay, Mary Harlan is asking, I have an old oak that has branches with paler color and leaves than the rest of the tree. Do I need to do anything?
You might have a problem with that older oak if parts of it are paler than others. Oaks and some other trees have a vascular system, the way their water runs through their cells, have a vascular system that's different than some other plants, in that if you hurt one root on an oak, a certain branch will actually show the impact of it, whereas a maple, if you hurt a root, it may show damage all over the place. So those individual roots that you're looking at, branches that you're looking at that are showing trouble, might have some connection to a root that was maybe cut when a driveway was put in, is being impacted by, it might be being impacted by pesticides or runoff, but without doing a really careful study, and for that you want a consulting arborist to come out and take a look at it. I can't tell you over the webinar.
All right, Nancy is asking, when cutting off suckers, doesn't that expose the trunk to problems?
When you cut anything off of the trunk, whether you're sawing off suckers or whether you're taking roots off, you are opening a wound, and you're asking the tree to be healthy enough to seal over that wound. They don't heal wounds, they seal, new wood grows over it, but there isn't much choice. There isn't much choice. Either you're going to take those suckers off and have the tree that you want, and you're going to take the roots off and have the plant grow healthy, or not. So smaller is better. Rubbing out suckers when they're small rather than cutting the big ones like I showed you on our crabapple tree is the better way to go.
And this
Elizabeth, from conservation districts, they sell bare root seedlings. We should have thought of that earlier. That
well, I
conservation.
Did you? That's right. No, I did. I said the soil conservation district. So you're right. Thank you, Elizabeth. And those sales are on right now. Contact your most people don't know they have a soil conservation district, but you do. And sometimes it's the extension.
Good one from Karen as well. I'm prioritizing people who are still online for the seminar right now. So Karen is asking, should you fertilize a tree when you plant it?
Should you fertilize a tree when you plant it? No. Almost all of the time, nursery grown plants have been fertilized, if not very well, over well, because they're looking to promote a lot of growth. You're looking for the plant to use the nutrients in your soil and grow out into your soil, not to stay right around the edges. So
yeah, we don't add fertilizer, and we don't do soil amendments. The tree eventually has to grow into that area.
We loosen the soil.
It.
Yeah, we loosen the
and
soil
mulch.
that's there and put mulch on. If you're going to use fertilizer at all, you're going to use an organic fertilizer, something that you're using on the whole bed anyway, a carbon-based, something that's going to break down gradually. You definitely don't, if you're doing a lot of cuts, like we're doing, you definitely do not want to use a water-soluble nitrogen, because that nitrogen can actually add rot. Cindy has raised her hand. I can see some of these things now. Cindy, we have to find Cindy if she'd be at the top.
I thought Sonia was doing that.
Oh, Sonia's doing that. Okay.
I thought.
We're working on it.
Go ahead, Cindy, your mic's on.
Oh, hi, I'm here now.
Hi, Cindy. What's your question?
Well, I'm thinking of moving my gooseberry bush. Any advice?
Well, tie it up so that the branches are out of your way. and cut, like I did the ginkgo, a trench around the drip line. And once you have the trench, just start rinsing soil from the root ball down into the trench and taking it out there so that you can lighten the load, and go ahead and then and pry it up and move it. That's the best advice I can give you.
Okay, what about all this root talking?
Well, if you see that when you dig it up and when you rinse the soil off the top of the roots, you will see whether or not the roots are wrapped around. And it's I just dug some hydrangeas out with Mark 2 weeks ago that he planted last year, and every single one of them had roots wrapped around the top, and we could see them once we took them out and rinsed the soil off the top. So you'll see that on your gooseberry the same way. Thanks for
Okay,
asking.
thanks.
Sure.
We also have Barbara's had her hand up for quite a while. Barbara, are you still there? I'm unmuting you.
Maybe it is time to get out and garden, so we might have lost some people. I'm sorry if we have lost some people.
Well,
George just thinks we should go on to HDTV. We're not very good at promoting ourselves or being
No.
commercial. I'm not sure that we could do that very well. It's great to talk to real people, and very good to talk to master gardeners. I know there are a lot of master gardeners who joined into the trial because they get continuing education credits this way. And I know that the master gardeners are the people who are going to turn around and hand this information to other people, and that's what we want to have happen. Go tell them.
yeah.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you everyone for being here
We
today.
will do the chat transcript.
Yep, and we will see you next week at the next webinar.
Take care, everyone.
Bye now.